Hilda, Hilda, Hilda. What is there to say about Hilda? Well, I could say it's a Netflix cartoon series that released its third and final season this past December. I could also say that since it began airing and since I began watching this show, it has been a delightful and charming experience for me, and I know many others. But I'd bet that if you're watching this video, you probably know all that already because you've also been keeping up with Hilda for years. It's hard for me to know where to start with this season, partially because I know we've all been watching the same show and pretty much been sharing the same opinions about it for so long. I kinda expected anything I would have to say about Season 3 would have been said already, considering I'm a few months late to the party, and turns out no, that is not the case. But still, where better to start than the beginning? The first major point of conversation relevant to Season 3 that makes itself immediately apparent is the fact that it takes place at least a year after the ending of the Hilda and the Mountain King movie. And I think this was a much more meaningful change for me than it was for most viewers. Like I said, this season dropped this past December, but I didn't get around to watching it until just last week. And I hopped on the Hilda train between seasons 1 and 2, so the gap of time between the movie and Season 3 was by far the longest I had to wait for more of this series. Because of this, I was slightly worried that I had forgotten too much of the show, or that I wouldn't be able to connect with it the same way I had before. I should also mention I made sure to avoid any of the promo material, which does kinda make it obvious that the characters are older. And so, when in the first minutes of this season you've got Astrid commenting on how tall Hilda's grown, and Johanna talking about how long it's been, all of those worries vanish. Immediately, I know that this season is going to treat it like a lot of time has passed, because a lot of time has passed, and it's ready to focus on new things. Which instantly made any of my concerns dissipate, and also got me completely reinvested and re-immersed in this world effectively. And the cherry on top, after experiencing the feeling that no time at all had passed from when I last engaged with this show, was Johanna voicing those exact thoughts.
Like it's been forever, yet no time at all.
It's like the writers are speaking directly to the audience, saying, hey, we know it's been a while for us too. It just immediately gets everyone back on the same page, which is precisely what the beginning of Season 3 needed. Another great result of the time skip is that it does a lot to kind of sidestep many of the problems that clung on to past seasons, at least temporarily. Many of you will remember how my favorite aspect of this show from the start was its ability to express exploration and discovery of the unknown so well. And how, after the first act of Season 1, I felt that the series struggled to recapture that feeling. But Season 3 does it. By introducing a brand new location that quickly shows itself to be full of hugely relevant secrets, and by hitting a soft reset button on the main characters, in many moments, it rekindles that feeling of utter wonder of the unknown, and it even has a unique spin on that feeling much of the time, which once again is permitted by the characters being older. That unique spin is the greater emphasis on the terrifying nature of the unknown. And I was very surprised to find that this was a change many people weren't happy with, stating that they didn't feel terror and horror were the kinds of emotions they come to this show to feel. And I certainly didn't come into this season hoping or expecting such, but the fact that I wasn't expecting it was an integral part of why it enhanced what was the initial appeal of the show for me. Past seasons and the movie have certainly dipped their toes into imagery that could be distressing for the viewer. But Season 3 takes it a good step further, and because this season is dealing with older characters for whom it is more appropriate to show in moments of fear, so many of the more exploratory scenes are filled with a sense of anticipation for what may reveal itself. Sure, it's a bit of a different kind of anticipation than what you would get knowing that nothing bad or traumatic could possibly happen to the characters, but it still grabs your full attention and puts you on the edge of your seat for extended periods of time, and that's a feeling I was very happy to experience once more with this show. Now, I will say that making the children feel more capable and reliable by making them older was an angle I'm glad they took. However, I do think that they didn't fully consider what the ramifications of suggesting that this season would be just a tad bit more adult would be, because it does somewhat magnify existing issues and reveal new ones. For example, another lingering issue I've always had with this show post the beginning of Season 1 was the way Johanna has consistently responded to Hilda getting herself into danger. And I want to be clear, now that we really know everything about her past, that my issue is no longer simply that Johanna should have punished Hilda for constantly disobeying her and doing dangerous shit, as I expressed in the past. What Johanna needed much earlier was more concrete demonstrations of her valuing Hilda's freedom. Pre-Season 3, it was easy to imagine that Johanna would want to balance Hilda's safety with her happiness, because what mother wouldn't? But that's the audience presuming something, not it being incontrovertibly demonstrated. What is incontrovertibly demonstrated constantly has always been Hilda getting herself into danger and Johanna worrying to death about her. And in Season 3, the danger is so much more viscerally felt by the audience, and yet there were multiple moments where Johanna picks Hilda having fun over ensuring her safety. And knowing what we know about her, we can go back and recontextualize many of these instances in a manner that makes Johanna's actions more understandable, but I do feel that because they were going to have Johanna's past be the big reveal during the finale of the show, they let Johanna's character stay almost in the same place right up until that point. And there is a part of me that feels conflicted as to whether or not it was worth it. On the one hand, it makes for an incredibly meaningful reveal, but on the other, keeping her in a state of limbo creates friction with the story moving around her in so many extreme ways. Now, there is one very brief moment in Season 3 that I actually think is precisely what we needed so much more of, and it happens early on into Episode 6. When we see Hilda sketching the wilderness that she is so enamored by, and then we see Johanna sketching Hilda sketching. This is one of those truly perfect isolated moments of film. It communicates so much in such a short amount of time. By showing us Johanna's love for her daughter through the same actions which Hilda uses to express love for the environment and exploration, the show creates a sense that Johanna truly does understand the way Hilda feels and wants nothing more than to see her indulge in that feeling. And it all happens in like 10 seconds with no words. Incredible. If this side of Johanna were allowed to come out more and in more explicit ways, so much of the incongruencies between her actions and stated values would become non-issues. And that doesn't mean reveal her whole backstory early on. The finale could still reveal the material events that led Johanna to feel the way she does, but we could still establish those feelings more concretely before doing that, without losing any of the impact of the grand reveal. I actually think doing this would have enhanced the grand reveal, if I'm being honest. We would have established a lovable trait for one of the main characters, which stimulates their development, and then give the audience the catharsis and closure of learning how that character acquired that trait. But the weird thing is, much like how the time skip sidesteps some of the issues of past seasons, the mechanics of Johanna's backstory kind of sidestep the issue with her character all the way up until the finale. Because Johanna had her memory of her parents erased as a child, as we learn, she always felt an emptiness, like there was a part of her that longed for the kind of freedom and wonder that she sees so clearly in Hilda. If we're trying to get on the nose about it, we could relate this to Hilda's blue hair. I don't actually know if that thing people say about you get your hair from your mother's father is true or not, but regardless, retroactively, we can see how Hilda's very existence serves as a reminder of the life Johanna was robbed of. The things that Johanna forgot as a child come as naturally to Hilda as the color of her hair. And that simultaneously brings Johanna the purpose and fulfillment of the emptiness within her, while also subconsciously reminding her of that which she has lost. So it kind of feels appropriate that Johanna as a character would be a bit stagnant and incomplete until she regained her memories. She literally was incomplete as a person up until then. I have no idea how this retroactive adjustment of my view on Johanna will impact possible rewatches of the series. After all, this was kind of an open wound for much of the show's run, but I'll be damned if they didn't at least stop the bleeding by the end. Which puts me in a weird spot, because after all is said and done, I am very happy with how Season 3 turned out, and yet my actual memory of watching it has its fair share of confusing, frustrating, or disappointing moments. For instance, I felt that much of this season was notably less subtle than past Hilda installments. Like, take Episode 3 for example, which I've seen get a lot of praise as one of the best of this season, and I really don't get it. Mainly because the entire thematic purpose of this episode is just a less complex and more heavy-handed version of what we learned in, like, Episode 2 of Season 1. And the movie to an extent. Hilda's sword fight with the Giant Slayer is a visual feast, certainly. However, what makes it compelling, what makes the audience invested in who will win, is because it determines whose outlook on the Giants is correct. If Hilda wins, the Giants are peaceful and only accidentally cause harm to humans, and if the Giant Slayer wins, they are dangerous monsters who need to be wiped out. And of course Hilda wins and converts the Giant Slayer over to the side of compassion and understanding by giving him a speech and pointing to all the damage he caused to everyone. And obviously that is a great message, but when you already had these themes of anti-nationalism and the correct course of action to take when you realize you've been complicit in hurting a group of people, tackled much more eloquently in the same series, it's hard not to see this as a bit of a waste of time. It also doesn't help that this whole less subtle retelling of a lesson we already learned has basically nothing to do with anything else going on this season, tangibly or thematically. Tangibly, this episode sees Hilda literally traveling back to an alternate timeline where the giants haven't jumped off the Earth yet, and they even do a little gag at the fact that this means all of their actions in this episode will be consequence-free.
You mean if we change something here, it won't affect our own timeline?
That's right. Consequence-free.
Excellent.
Wait.
They literally call attention to the fact that anything that happens in this timeline will have no effect on the one we're home to. And that could work out just fine. Hilda doesn't have to cause some crazy butterfly effect for this episode to feel like it contributes something to the serialized story of Season 3 as a whole. Pocket Dimension stories can be an excellent way to insert a lot of character development into your story while putting the actual plot on hold for a bit. But Hilda doesn't do any real development in this episode. Instead, she teaches other people the lesson of the day and then goes back to business as usual by the next episode. And sure enough, we never hear from this other timeline again. That kind of happens a lot in this season. They inject new settings, new characters, new ideas into the world, they rush to justify why those elements were added, and then they drop them completely. Other people have brought up this criticism of, I don't even remember her name, Louise, another member of the Sparrow Scouts who goes on an adventure with the main characters and sure seems like she will continue to hang out with them after her introductory episode, and then poof, she's gone aside from 2 very brief visual cameos. Same thing happens with the Spider Frog. They do a whole episode of the most nerve-wracking, terrifying chase sequences in the show, period, which was great. Then the Spider Frog just gets to roam free and we never see it again at all. This one was even more jarring because the only reason Hilda and Johanna didn't get eaten by it is because it just so happens to hate the taste of humans. Which sure is a bit Deus Ex Machina, but more importantly, it means that presumably the Spider Frog is just fine with non-human creatures, at the very least fairies. So now I've just gotta watch the rest of the show and pretend like there's not a bloodthirsty super predator running loose that would absolutely eat Astrid alive. And it's even more bizarre because the Spider Frog has one of the most misplaced moral lesson speeches right before disappearing forever. That is its whole spiel about not having any word to define itself under and how that was the way of the world long ago. And like, once again, great lesson. Us humans have a real tendency to try to define everything we observe and fit everything into boxes based on those observations. But that's an organizational tool that we impose onto the natural world, not how the natural world actually works. And I find this lesson very applicable to my life at least. For instance, this is exactly the kind of speech I've heard agendered people use to describe their identity. So hopefully you understand why it rubs me the wrong way when the speech is being given by an actual monster that has been terrorizing our main characters for the entire back half of this episode. And one which doesn't get any sort of humanizing or justification for its actions beyond the presumed it has to kill to eat. This episode is so weird to me because the premise of it, that being the most terrifying episode thus far where Johanna actually has all the agency in saving Hilda from the dangerous situation she gets caught in, is perfect. It's exactly what this season needed. And then it throws you a curveball at the very end like, psych, this episode is actually about something completely different. And then it's gone. And the ending of episode 6, much like episode 3, doesn't thematically tie into what the season builds up to being about. And maybe that frequent thematic distractibility this season seems to have is why I haven't seen anyone else identify what this show's penultimate message is, despite the fact that it is really, really obvious. Hilda is a story about the timeless trope of found family, and I really do believe this is what the creators had in mind from the start. The entire finale, for one, beautifully portrays this through Johanna, who, after recovering her memories of her fairy family, after reconnecting with such an important part of herself, struggles to see why Hilda would ever want to leave the Fairy Isle. She talks of exploring and adventuring, but this time with a proper family, referring to her blood family. And of course, this rings hollow to Hilda because her and the viewer's proper family consists of all the characters we've met and grown attached to up until now. This is a reflection on just how much this show means to the audience after going through so much of it. And ultimately, Johanna comes to see the value in that, the value in the relationships we put in work to foster. And once we operate with that theme already in mind, it starts to become clear where the creators were thinking of it throughout Season 3, even if they did get distracted at times. Luis, the frog spider, the alternate timeline people, all of them only add to the enormous ensemble cast that this show has accrued over its run, which is very much framed as evidence of all the meaningful experience our main characters have gone through together. Hilda's dad contributes to this theme in a way that comes off as super out of place at first, but actually really does feel completely thematically appropriate with this framework for understanding the season. His existence was a huge mystery and lightly hinted at in the movie, so one would expect him to suddenly be a huge deal once he actually does show up, for him to completely change the character dynamics upon arrival, but that doesn't happen. He just shows up pretty much at random, and he comes with no huge backstory, no immediate effect on the greater plot, and frankly, no real notable on-screen presence. He just shows up and he's just a guy. He's just a guy. He's here now. And yeah, he's been absent from his daughter's life for the majority of it. He hasn't had any of the shared experiences that Hilda and the audience have with Frida, David, Johanna, and all the other supporting characters. He doesn't start to hold real narrative weight until he actually does go on an adventure with Hilda, and in the process shows how much he cares for her in his own flawed ways. This is why Hilda becomes obsessed with finding him again once he disappears, and why once we do finally see him again in the finale, he's got that screen presence. It didn't matter before that he was related to Hilda by blood, but now that he's had shared experience with her, now that he's actually formed a connection, he earns the audience's investment. I could break down countless more examples to prove this found family reading I have, but honestly, all I need to do is direct your attention to the final scene of the show, where we are blasted with a non-stop stream of the characters we've grown attached to over the course of this series. Again, I can't believe I haven't seen anyone else pointing this out, but these characters aren't all here just for fan service. It is fan service, very much so, but it also tells us indisputably that Hilda and Johanna made the right decision in leaving the Fairy Isle. And it doesn't discredit the value of blood family in doing so, but rather stresses that Hilda's and the audience's most important family is here. This is our home, this is where we belong. And I can't think of a more fitting note to end on. It seems to be nearly universally agreed that one of the biggest strengths of this series on the whole is its ability to create an atmosphere that invites the viewer into the world of these characters and to experience it as they do along with them. And I gotta say, it succeeded, at least for me. Although I had my issues with it along the way, and even now, Hilda as a creative work has shown itself to be remarkably capable of minimizing its weaknesses and enhancing its strengths. And when those strengths are really zeroed in on, when it gives itself the time and focus that it needs, as is the case with the basically movie-length finale, the results wash away so many of the missteps that may have been made along the way. I've said it before, but it feels very good to be involved in the discussion surrounding such a consistently enjoyable piece of art, and one that everyone who watches it seems to share my overall opinions on. So I would just like to say thank you all for making Hilda an even more fun experience than it already was. And especially thank you to all of the staff responsible for bringing this graphic novel to life on the screen. I hope you've felt the same if you were at all keeping up with this show and/or my discussions of it, and I very much hope that you have a wonderful day. Wait, don't leave yet! As you've probably noticed, I have this amazing new avatar illustration, which was drawn by my good friend Moonirxe, and their commissions are currently open, so you should all go pay them to draw you something. Their socials are on screen and in the description, as well as their commissions sheet. They are super easy to work with in my experience, super good at what they do, and they deserve all the support they can get. Support independent artists! And with that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Oh yeah, this season was also, really funny. I don't remember laughing this much in past seasons. Alright, I'm done now.